Lighting.
Go back. There.
Looks really nice.
Okay, welcome to this communications training for REXSAC. And I know that there are probably around maybe 10 people in the room. I know that there are some online as well, so welcome. We're going to have a couple of hours together. This is going to be a quite interactive session. I do want to say that for those, thank you for turning myself off on the computer. For those that are online, if you are logged in to your Google account, and probably most of you are, then you can use the chat function. If this does not work for you, then you can always email me, and you find my email address in the invitation, and I will bring it up. So interactive session, questions throughout. We're going to have a little interactivity as well. We have 3 communications members from SEI here to present, and I will leave it up to them to present themselves. But I thought we would just go quickly around the room and just say who we are, what you do. Shortly, I mean quickly, not all that you do, and from which university you're from. Okay.
Should I look in the camera as well?
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
All right. Hey, my name is Kalle. I work at Department of Physical Geography at Stockholm University. I'm a PhD student and work with land use intensification.
Hello, I'm Jean-Sébastien Boutet from KTH University here in Stockholm, and I work in resource policy and aboriginal policy.
My name is Dima. I'm a PhD student at KTH here in Stockholm, and I work on the history of environmental concepts in the Soviet Union. Yeah.
Hello everybody, my name is Jasmine Pylkkänen and I'm a PhD student at the University of Oulu, so just visiting Stockholm now, and I work with environmental risk governance.
Okay, hello, my name is Sandra Fischer and I'm a PhD student from Stockholm University at the same department as Kalle, and I will look into pollution transport from mining, basically.
Hello everybody, I'm Hanna Stålberg. I work here at SEI as Communications Officer for Climate and Sustainable Finance.
Hi, I'm Katja. I'm a Communications Officer here at SEI.
And you will be presenting later as well, which I will be doing as well. My name is Anneli Sandin and I also work with communications here.
Hey, and I'm Ylva. I'm going to present myself very soon when I have my media training.
My career.
Well, hello, my name is Hilla Wingqvist, and I'm at KTH at the Division of History of Science, Technology and Environment, and I'm a PhD student and my research is within abandoned mines.
Hi, I'm Corinna Röver. I'm also a PhD student at the same division as Camilla, Jean-Sébastien and Dima at KTH, and I look at the history of reindeer husbandry in Sweden.
My name is Eric Paglia, a researcher at the Swedish Defence University and also affiliated with the KTH Division of History of Science, Technology and Environment, and do Arctic research amongst other topics, and particularly interested in Svalbard.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. So I will just quickly leave it over to Ylva.
Okay. I'm glad to see you all here today. I'm working as press officer at the Stockholm Environment Institute, and I've been working together with REXSAC previously, launching the project. And I've been also working as an acting director of communications at SEI, and I've been working with media relations now almost 15 years. So I'm going to share some knowledge with you here today, and I'm happy if you write down your questions, and you can keep them until the question. We'll have 5 minutes question and then a practical training. So I hope you're going to enjoy it, and I hope you're going to learn something new. In my experience, the world we live in now is that if you can't be seen, you don't exist. There is a sort of lack of understanding, I would say, between the scientific world and the more external world where CEOs run and politicians and the general public. And that's the driving force behind my work. That's why I work with this thing, because I used to be in the PR world on a PR agency, and I saw a lot of interesting scientific results coming out on climate change specifically. But they were sort of hidden in some kind of strange corner of a website, or it couldn't be understood what it was about. So I think that there is still a gap between science and the media. So I hope we're going to overbridge that gap. So why is the media training agenda? I'm going to go through this quite briefly, but we do have time for questions. Why is media presence important? I think it's important to ask yourself that question. And also, what are important news from a journalistic perspective? How do the journalists think? What's in their head? What's on their agenda? And also, it's very important to think, how do you prepare yourself before a media interview? Or if you get a quick phone call, you're on an airport, someone wants to know about this new report just launched yesterday. What do you do? How do you prepare yourself? And then we're going to do some practical training where I want your input, and you can already now start to think about a specific topic that you want to write about. So, why is media presence important? Of course, there's a lot of different opinions about why it's important to be seen in the media. But SCI took a decision a long time ago, 2011, that we want to bridge out and be proactive working with the media. And I can see like 5 different things that's important. And reaching out with your research findings is maybe the most important. If you do your research and only you know about it in the end of the project, it's going to be maybe fun and interesting for your personal experience. But you will not share your results with the world. And I think there is a crucial thing. And then you can decide your target audience and who do you want to share it with and so on. But I see that as the main thing, to reach out with your results. Another one is to improve policy decisions. We do a lot of policy to science engagement here at SCI. And we would like the politicians, the CEOs and so on to consider the research we do when they are making decisions about the future. What kind of society do we want to have in the future? Attracting research funding is another one. If the funders of your projects read about you in the newspapers or see you on TV, they will maybe be more likely to give you more funding if they know who you are, what you do, and what your results are. And I think the 2 last ones is a bit more personal. Gain experience in formulating key messages. I can't stress that enough. I've been working at SCI now for 6 years, and I still think there's a huge challenge to formulate like 3 key messages on a big report. It's always going to be challenging and tough to captivate everything you've done maybe for 3 years' time in a couple of sentences. But it's great to do that training over and over again. You will gain experience. And of course, career improvement. Good to think about. We have the research and scientific world here where you climb a ladder and it's very specific how you do that. But in the sort of more normal world outside, it's more about if you've been seen in the media, you Google people before you employ them, these kind of things. And if you can read about them and get a personal idea about who they are or what they have been doing in their career, it's going to probably be more likely that you get employed somewhere in the future. So I'm going to give you just a snapshot of SCI's media outreach last year. We do communicate globally, and mostly in English. Media articles in newspapers, radio and TV. We had 1,330 articles last year. And around 30% of these were published in Sweden. Because we do a sort of work in Sweden, we also do work in other countries. But we have a lot of Swedish funders, and that's important to remember. Media outlets include the Japan Times, Thomson Reuters, Washington Post, The Guardian, Dagens Nyheter, Swedish Radio, everything, like from big to small. And I think it's important to remember that it's great to engage with the media, no matter if it's the Washington Post or if it's the local newspaper in Svalbard, for example. You should do the same kind of preparations. You should think the same way, because the process is quite similar, no matter who you talk to. This is an article from the Arctic Resilience Report that was launched in end of 2016, and I just want to give you a snapshot of how this media engagement can be successful. This was a huge report that was launched together with the Stockholm Resilience Center, SCI, and there was one article in The Guardian specifically that was very, very successful. And here's Marcus Carson quoted from Stockholm Environment Institute. It did create 98,216 shares within a month. So after 1 month, this article had been shared through social media this many times. So you can get an extensive spread if you do it right. Of course, it requires engagement, it requires a lot of work behind it, but I think we're very proud of this outcome. And The Guardian also created a video, so of course that also raised the interest, the sort of interest of this article, because you can click there, you can watch how sort of Arctic melts. Yeah, so this is just an example on what you can create. The global media landscape is very different today compared to maybe 10, 15 years ago. You have different media formats: TV, radio, print, op-eds, blogs, interviews, and journalists are searching for daily news or specific news relevant to their audience. You do have special journalists and news agencies. Some are reporting on Asia, some others are reporting on Europe, some are reporting on war and crime, some others are reporting on environment. So you need to have that in mind when you do speak to the media. And there are, of course, national differences. Just the language issue is huge. If you write an article and communicate with Le Monde, it might be best to do this in French, if you can. And also Spanish is a big language outside English. This is just to give you a snapshot of how the world use different type of social media. The blue is Facebook, the light blue is ozone. Yeah, so you have different types of social media in the world, and that also, of course, influence the newspapers, because what they want is to have clicks on their articles. They want to have the articles read by many readers, and they want to, of course, sell or get more readers to their newspaper. So it's important also to see that there are huge differences globally. I also can't stress the importance of news agencies enough. News agencies cooperate with lots of newspapers and radio and TV around the globe. And here are some of the largest ones. So if you do manage to get something through to a news agency, it will spread. You can be sure it will spread around the globe, because they feed into lots of the internal systems that the newspapers work in, which means that the journalists sit there and they get a constant feed from this type of organizations or agencies. So, news value. How do the journalists think in their head or in their mind? News journalism has a broadly agreed set of values, often referred to as newsworthiness. And this I do work with every day. One researcher come to me and say, I think this is important news. We want to put a press release out. And then we need to look from the communication perspective. Is this really a press release? Or is it a blog? Or is it an op-ed or whatever? So that's within SDI. From a journalistic perspective, I can't stress this enough. It has to be new information. Or that's what they look for. New information that's relevant to the public or to their audience. If there's a journalist writing for, let's say, European officials in Europe, it has to be relevant for that audience. Otherwise, they're just going to think this is not for us. So that process is really crucial. So it has to be relevant to the audience of the TV station, radio station, and so on. It should, of course, be timely, and this is also important to remember. If there's a decision going on globally or a big meeting with world leaders gathering, and you do have research that sort of connects to that, it might be smart to communicate that the same day or a couple of days beforehand or in connection to that. So if it refers to a specific decision, event, or incident, that's good as well. And of course, it should be relevant to people. We're all people and human beings. And if I'm a reader to a newspaper, an article, and I read it, I think it would be great if I felt something. Oh, wow, this is interesting. Or, oh, that's very bad. What can I do about it? So what you want to have in this article is engagement and a sort of a feedback effect. So the people behind it is, we need to remember them. And I don't know if you heard, how many have heard about the wow effect here? Not so many. But what I mean is that you need to create the wow effect, which means the Arctic Resilience Report, for example, it was a huge collaboration. It was new information that not a lot of people knew about. And when you read that, it's like, wow, this is really happening now and here. And what can we do about it? If I read about something going on in Africa, I might be like, wow, this is really horrible. I want to go there and help them. So it's something that's sort of interesting, new. Yeah, you should feel something when you read the news. When it comes to preparing your media interview, I don't know how many have been in an interview here? Not yet. It will come, it will come. So I think very important to remember is that there are different things you need to do beforehand. Key messages, supporting information, maybe a bit about the event you're going to speak about or the report or a link to something that's interesting. You need to use simple language. I mean, if you've been doing research on a specific topic for 20 years, you do create a specific type of jargon, abbreviations, whatever, which might be totally incomprehensible to the audience that you're speaking to. Bridging. It's important to try to bridge the things that you are doing in your project to what's going on out here in the world, or in your country, or in the local community where you engage. Difficult questions. It's great to prepare for difficult questions. If you're a skilled journalist, you might be trying to push the interview person to find these like tricky questions. That's a bit sensitive, and you should be prepared for these questions when you do an interview. And defining limits. It's always great to ask, I mean, time limits, deadlines, and these kind of things, but also limits when it comes to your knowledge. If you do research on water, maybe you shouldn't speak about climate change, for example. So be clear about your sort of expertise area. And if you do step out of it, which you can do if you've done it many times, it should be clear that this is not your sort of home area. And it's also then important to say, yes, this is very interesting, and my personal opinion is that this and that. Because when you do research, you have to link back to the research and science most of the time in order to be credible. And I think one important, very, very good thing is practice. It's like if you do a performance, play an instrument or singing or whatever. If you haven't practiced, it's going to be tricky to do a great job. So if you do an interview, it might be like you might be nervous the first time and so on. But if you prepared well, then it's practice. Doing lots of interviews, being on TV, radio, you will gain experience and you will feel much more secure and to the point. It's a learning curve all the time. So, key messages before an interview. I mean, you do key messages all the time, not only for interviews, in a report, policy recommendations, whatever. But there are some specific things to think about here. And as I said before, bridging the message to the current news angle. And a news angle is something that the journalist can ask you for. They might be interested in climate change and new decisions on European level, for example. And that's their angle then. But if you do have specific knowledge about that topic, you should try to bridge your knowledge to their news angle so that you speak about things that you are comfortable with and that you have the expertise about. So that's like a sort of preparation work to be done. It's great to think that you can formulate 3 key messages, and you should always start with the most important one first. Because if there's a radio interview, you might have 30 seconds, you might have 10 minutes, you might have 2 minutes. You don't really know. But you should know that beforehand, so you know how you can prepare your key messages. And they should be comprehensible to the reader or the listener. And that's often forgotten, I would say, because it's so easy to get lost in your own world and your own knowledge. But try to think a bit wider. And how many know exactly everything about climate change, for example? Not so many. But the sort of public awareness is quite high. And as I said before, it's very important when you do research to maintain credibility and the reputation of your organization. So it's not only about you as a person or a scientist, it's also about who are you speaking for. You're speaking probably for an organization or for a research project or for a wider community, like your fellow researchers, and you should remember that. So we go into that a little bit more in the training. New research should be presented in a short, accurate, and interesting way. And with that, I mean, try to get the main point through first, and not the background, not the method. It's not relevant when you go into news. If the journalist is interested in that, they might ask questions, and then it's relevant. But you should try to think, okay, what's the most important thing I want to say in this context or on this topic? Because that's what people are going to remember and listen to. And we can't remember so many things, even though we are maybe scientists and very intelligent, and there's still a sort of, you need to be quite clear in your messaging to get that through to the audience. And key questions. You can feel like this sometimes, like, oh, what should I do? And there's so many things I want to say. But it's important to remember these questions when you formulate your messages. What is the overall problem, message you want to say, you want to tell? When will this happen, or when did this happen, or when will it happen in the future? Why is this important? Why should we care about this topic? and how can we change, or what can be done, or other decisions needs to be taken. And then the person who is involved. Is it everyone affected by climate change, or is it only Sweden? Which is, of course, not the case. But that's great. What, when, why, how, and who. And this is challenging. I know it. I'm trying this every day myself. So before we start the practical training, I want to have some questions from you. If you have things that came up.
Maybe I can start us off with a question. For those sitting in the room, maybe you have questions. Maybe you need some help. Maybe, outside of this training, maybe someone's contacted you for REXSAC in a year's time. Maybe you've listened to all this, but maybe you've forgotten some of it in a year. Can you reach out to Ylva for help?
Yes, of course, I'm happy to help within your project, because we do work with the REXSAC at SCI. So if you do have questions, please come to me. We do.
I actually have a question. I'm just going to try to formulate it, but I was actually called up by a journalist asking me for an interview about 3 weeks ago, asking me to comment on something which I thought was completely uninteresting.
That's a good question.
So how do I handle that? And he's probably going to call me tomorrow or the day after, asking me to do this interview. And and he said that he will write about this regardless if I comment it or not. But
was it something in your field?
Yeah, it's about. We want to map snow fields and some other things with drones, and we sent in an application for a permit, just a permit application. And he wants me to discuss the permit application or something like that.
Okay.
So how do I deal with it?
I mean, the main thing is to ask yourself the question, is this relevant for the project? And I don't know how he got the information. Did you tell him?
No, he's reading all the documents coming into the...
Yeah, exactly. So he's sitting on that. But I would put it like this. If you don't comment on it, who will then do it? Then he will create his own story, which might not be the correct one. But of course, you should think about, is this something I have anything to say about? And if you don't, then you have to sort of turn it down. Because let's say it's legal questions and you're not a legal expert and you don't know what's going to happen exactly, then maybe you should refer them to someone else that is an expert, preferably within the project, because then you will get some exposure for the project. But it's also sensitive with these legal aspects, I would say. You have to think it through, and it's tough to make a do this or do that just when I haven't seen everything.
Hi, my name's Rob. I'm the Director of Communications here at SCI. And I actually was going to say some of the things you just said in your reply. I just wanted to add that I think that when a journalist contacts you with that sort of request, I think it's a good example actually of something where you sort of wonder, well, what on earth is their angle? Why are they interested in this? I think you do need to bear in mind, as Ylva said, if they're going to write about it anyway, do you want to own the story, or do you want to just be the subject of the story? And if you want to try and have more ownership of the story, then you need to think about, so what are the things that I really want to get across the journalist? And also be very clear, and that's the point of these key messages, have those 3 things that you want the journalist to write about, that you want the quote to be about, and limit yourself to them. So I think the point that Ylva said about creating delimiting what you can talk about is really important, because it's very easy in an interview to sort of answer questions and keep on talking, and it's quite friendly, and then you lose control over understanding what is the quote that's going to be used. So that's why the key messages are so key. That's why understanding, I'm going to talk about these, I'm going to repeat these 3. That's why politicians, when you hear a politician being interviewed, you can feel very frustrated because they just stick to these 3 points. That's because they want those to be the ones that are used, not something else that they ramble on about. So I mean, it's hard to know exactly to give precise advice. Maybe you want to talk to Ylva afterwards. It depends who the journalist is a little bit and who are they writing, which outlet are they writing for and things like that. But generally speaking, I think we'd say, provided you're well prepared and feel you've got those 3 key messages, it's probably going to be okay.
But the job of the scientist,
So they can hear you.
sorry, but the job of the scientist is also to provide a bit more depth and complexity to the public debate. And I wonder if the politician model is really a good model in the sense that, I mean, it is very frustrating to hear almost every politician sticking to those 3 main points, right? So I wonder what your take is on that.
I don't want to answer that. I don't want to. It's a very good question.
I mean, it's like you speak to a friend. Think in a way you can think like that. Do you want your friend to know everything about your personal life, or do you want them to know this? Or what do you want to say? Like, it of course depends. But when you're in the media, you have to remember that this article can be sent around the globe. So you're in an external. You're presenting your research externally to an audience that you can't really control their thinking, and then you should think through before you speak what you want to say. That's maybe the main difference between speaking to a friend and speaking to a journalist. So everything you say can be quoted in the wrong way or in the correct way, and your job is to basically make it as good as you can.
Yeah, I totally understand your concern as a scientist about the complexity of the picture that you would like to draw about your research. But unfortunately, in the age of information, the attention span has decreased a lot. And no matter how complex and well constructed your messages, people will only be able to get that much. So I always recommend in the cases of very complex messages, drill them down to small bits and then break a complex message into 3 simple messages. And that will be your points of communication.
And you will still keep the nuance.
Yeah.
I just add one thing. I completely sympathise with. It's a great question. I sympathise with the point you're making. I don't think these things are mutually exclusive. So I think that's what you heard from Ylva and Katja, that you can actually get some nuance and depth by using these techniques of creating key messages. I was giving you just an example of if you're in a situation where you don't really know where this interview is going, then having your home territory of those key messages is a sort of safe zone for you. And I think actually most journalists, when they're talking to scientists, they actually do want to give the opportunity to get at least some depth within the parameters of the short attention span and of limited space, either in newspapers as on radio programs. So, you've got a short amount of time. So in that time, how do you get across the key things that you want to get across? There isn't always that sort of, the 10-minute interview, the half-an-hour documentary that's going to allow you to get into a lot of depth. But my main point I want to get across is that what's the purpose of the interview? The interview is actually a way of opening up doors for people who then want to pursue other ways of getting in-depth information. And I think that what's really interesting about the new media landscape is that a media interview is great, but you should also be thinking about, can I write a blog that I author myself that is giving much more of an insight into the research process or a particular data collection, field trip that we've done. There are other things that you need to use in this sort of, it's like a smorgasbord of different ways of communicating about your research. And media is only one of them. And you can't expect them to get into massive amounts of detail given the limited space, the limited time, and all of those sorts of things. So think of it as one part in your battery, in your arsenal of ways of communicating. Is that okay?
Good. Do we have any other questions?
I don't know if there's a kind of way to answer this question, but I've been just struggling with this thing that as a PhD student, when you haven't published much, and you know, it's like your process is not there yet. How to kind of jump there and say things about your research when it's so unfinished. But in my case, the case study that I'm looking at is very much in the news all the time. This morning, the last time actually. So I feel like I'm losing this momentum if I don't throw in things. But then on the other hand, I feel like I don't know enough to claim to be an expert, or so kind of how to deal with this as a PhD student. I guess that's
okay.
It's different if you have a long career as a researcher. Then you can use things you've done before and kind of like combine things.
But of course, it's a balance act. I would say you should be brave enough in order to go into and speak into the media, because most often, even though you worked on the same topic for 20 years, people do feel I don't have enough knowledge. They tell me that, and I'm like, you worked on this topic for 20 years. You have much more knowledge than the people have been working in economy or, you know, with gardening or whatever. So it's important to remember you do have knowledge that no one else has. But of course, as a scientist, you need to also be clear then about your sort of level of competence and say that to the journalist, I've just started my research, but what I find is interesting from a personal perspective. Then you're a person. You're not the sort of scientist, the professor up there. But you should be also brave about speaking to, you know, media, the local media or whatever, because there's so many people out there that are not scientists or don't have anything on their feet, basically, that speak to the media all the time. So it's about your own credibility, of course, but then also as an expert, you need to. Expert is a very sort of big expression, but you can be an expert in many areas, and a lot of people do take that expert role just by, you know, they read some articles and then they are the expert in their opinion. So don't be too shy, because then you will, as you say, lose momentum.
Yeah, I thought I'd just try and back that up with the practical example of how might you go about doing it. So I think the one way you could think about doing it, if you haven't published, you know, an academic article or a report for whatever reason, maybe, you know, they're in press, maybe you're still working and gathering data and stuff like that, but is to write a blog. I can't stress enough how often journalists will go and look at a blog and read a blog and then say, wow, this is really interesting. This is relevant because it's in the news at the moment. This is someone who's got an insight. Let's not go as far as saying it's expertise, expertise as you might call it, but an insight that I think that we can follow up on. And so I think that's a great place to start. It also will help you sort of organize your thoughts, organize the messages, and organize what you've got to say on this particular topic. So I recommend blogging and social media for everybody, but particularly for maybe people who are PhD students, sort of starting out in this. I think it was a really good way to sort of build a bit of a reputation for having at least working on a topic and build that aura of expertise.
That is a great segue in 15 minutes to our next presenter, who will explain exciting things about writing a blog. And I do want to say, however, that if you haven't written a blog and want some help, then please reach out. But also, as a ground to start on is the REXSAC website, and I will be hounding you, especially PhD students. I will be hounding you this year to get in there and practice, because unfortunately that is not being seen by millions yet. Yet. So for those who are watching online, we're going to move over to a practical session for 15 minutes. So please go have coffee You can listen to the actual practical example, but for those of you who actually would want a little break, then please join us again in 15 minutes from now.
Okay, thank you for listening. But I think this is a great opportunity for you now to practice on writing a headline and a preamble. We've done this a couple of times at SCI, and it's quite interesting to try your own topic. So you select one topic that you are familiar with, or you can make one up. It's just for you to practice. And then you try to write like a headline and a preamble that could be placed in a press release or a media pitch. A preamble is, I'm going to show you. So the headline, there is also different from a headline on a report and a headline in a newspaper. So just think about this. This is an example from The Guardian. And the headline here is slightly long in my opinion, but still it captures the main message of the entire article. So more than 100 cities now mostly powered by renewable energy, data shows. And what does this create in your mind? To me it creates, wow, 100 cities, that's interesting. And this data, how can I look at them? So the headline is supposed to create your like you want to read more. That's basically what it needs to create. And it can be short. If you look in newspapers, normally there are like 5-6 words. That's it. And they are not telling everything, but they are making you curious to read more and learn more. And the preamble is below. It's just a short, maybe one sentence about the entire topic, like a summary, but very brief. And here the summary is the number of cities getting at least 70% of their total electricity supply from renewable energy has more than doubled since 2015. So there's one figure, it says what it has done and it says when. And then you can read more about this topic in the article. So basically it's to create curiosity and then also summarize everything that's in the article in a very short text. And that is the way you write press releases and media pitches. And a media pitch is basically, it's not an entire release, but it might be an email, personal email from me to The Guardian saying, yeah, we have this new report coming out in 3 days and it's about this and it's about that. Here's the interview people. You can call them directly if you want or book interviews with me. So the pitch is more personal and it's not as formal as a press release. So I now want you to focus your mind and be creative and write this. You have like 10 minutes and then we have 5 minutes for throwing up some examples on the table. Okay, thank you for listening. Now you can go and have your coffee and I'll work with them. Okay. Examples? 1, 2, and come on. One more. Okay, great.
It's not supposed to be real, is it?
No, I mean it can be made up. It's more about it's more about trying to do this in a sort of, you know, you don't have a long time sometimes to write things, and it's about getting the practice going to think in this news way. Okay, so we start with you then.
Oh.
Is that fine? So a microphone was needed, yes. There you go. So do you want to read what you wrote?
It's it's about an issue in the region of Canada, debate surrounding caribou harvesting and the impacts on a particular caribou herd. So my headline was just industrial development responsible for George River caribou decline. I guess, did you want to hear the preamble?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the preamble is controlling the subsistence harvests in Labrador lacks evidence and may not lead to herd improvement, new study finds. So it's basically saying that, industrial development is responsible for caribou decline and maybe not so much the subsistence harvest of indigenous people. So.
Yeah, I think my spontaneous reaction is that it's good. The length is good. It feels like it's short enough, and these kind of things. What is the feeling behind it? It doesn't create a feeling when I hear it.
It doesn't
like
create an emotion.
Yeah, emotion, exactly. So where's what you could add is maybe the people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many are affected, or
Yeah.
is it about a village or something that creates something in your mind?
Mm-hmm.
Any other thoughts from you, guys? Okay, next example. Take you behind.
Okay, this might be slightly too long. Let's see. So my headline is Finland is not alone with tailings spawned risks. Worries over mining waste issues becoming global. The Talvivaara nickel mine in Finnish subarctic has been at the center of national level public debating throughout the 2010-ish, especially since the major tailings pond leakage in 2012 released 1.2 million cubic meters environmentally hazardous waste water into the surrounding environment. Finland is not, however, alone with such mining waste issue. In recent years, tailings pond issues have surfaced in, for example, Canada, Brazil, Spain, and Papua New Guinea.
Wow, that's a lot of information.
It was too long, I know.
So my first reaction was there was a couple of words I didn't understand.
Yeah.
And then that just sort of started with history, 2010, 2012, too far away. I mean, you could shorten that down and say it's a huge problem. I mean, and then you can, then you can put that further down. So that was my spontaneous reaction, and slightly long, maybe a bit too much information on the same sort of place. Otherwise, yeah. It sounds very interesting. That was my spontaneous reaction. It's like, what is it? I want to know more. Okay.
It made you more curious to read.
Yeah, curious to read more. Exactly. And also good that it placed the country in the headline. It's always creates attention, especially for the people living in Finland.
All right, so I think my preamble is way too long, but anyway, the headline is Exploitation causes Sami reindeer herders to soon spend more time in meetings than with the reindeer. The number of wind turbines, mines and other types of exploitation in northern Sweden has increased so much in recent years that it impacts the quality of reindeer husbandry negatively. It also means that reindeer herders has to spend so much time in planning meetings to try to prevent these projects that it takes all the focus of reindeer herding, deteriorating the situation even more.
I think it's interesting because it's a very new angle. I haven't heard it before. Spending time in meetings or being out with the you directly get a picture of this in your head, and that's good. Creating picture in your mind, writing these first things are great. So good work, everyone. I think I'm going to close it off now for the next session. And you got a feel for trying, and I think you did a great job. I've had this, I think it's the 4th time now we've done this practical training, and sometimes we get like an essay. So great work. Great start.
We're a little behind. I just want to say thank you to Ylva. Fantastic and great teamwork and interactivity. So thank you. I do, and we're, yeah, should we give her a round of applause to Ylva? Yes. And I give to you. And before we move on to Katja, I do want to say maybe 3 minutes to fill up our coffee cups, grab some cinnamon buns, and maybe visit the restrooms. 3 minutes, and then we'll start again. Thanks.
Oh, you have buckets. Where do you want it?
You get some air in the room, yeah? The wire. Okay. Take maybe we should.
We practice.
But it's still, I still remember the discussion.
Yes, I'm not really sure. It's Bristol. There's professional improvement. No, that's true.
Good. Yeah. Hi, I'm Katja. I work here as a communications officer at the CI. I really enjoy working with scientists, understanding science, and I love telling science stories. And blogging is by far, I think, my favorite communications tool. So I guess that's why I have been asked to do this presentation. But first, before we go into all the nitty-gritty of blogging, I would like to state why it is important to communicate about science and why it is so important to do it effectively. Now, when I speak to researchers preparing to make a blog about their studies, I always ask themselves, why do you do your research? Like, I know that many scientists really love sitting in their Excel spreadsheets and dig into the archive documents, but I really hope that you guys do science not just for the sake of science, although I understand it is a real pleasure for scientists to do that. But I hope, especially in the case of sustainability, that you want to make a change. And to make a difference, you must communicate. There is no way you can make a difference if you don't talk to people about your research and what there needs to be done to make things happen, to make the change. And I think it is particularly important in the case of sustainability issues, because it is so multidisciplinary, because we have to innovate across scales, across times, and across different disciplines and many different industries and sectors. Now, saying that, I also think it is important to acknowledge that in the age of information, it is not just enough to publish the study in a journal and then think, yes, this will change the world. No, things are not happening like that anymore, because we have internet, because everybody is vlogging, blogging, tweeting, putting posts on Facebook. So it is unlikely that somebody will download your paper if you haven't promoted it online, or you haven't mentioned a keyword of it in the Google search. Like, it will not just, people will not be able to find it. At the same time, with an incredible amount of information and incredible information noise, as I said also early in my remark, the attention span of people has decreased. And if you're not able to grab their attention and make them interested in your research, tell your story fast, effectively, or at least make them a soundbite of it, so they get interested enough in it to go to a hyperlink and download your paper, it is just ineffective for you to achieve the goals of the projects like REXSAC, for example. So I think that science communication is a way to overcome these challenges. It's a way for you to tell your story personally. Why are you interested? Why is this important? To express your passion. And I think that blog is a good way to start, and it's a good base for creating other types of content about your research, because it will make you think of the main things that you are trying to achieve in your research. And now to the nitty-gritty of science blogging. So what is a blog? The blog is a short online text. Usually I would say, okay, write 2 A4 pages, then we will cut it to 500, 800 words. It should be idea focused. So as we said earlier about the key messages, don't try to pack too much in your blog. Better write 3 blogs than 1 blog that is incomprehensible and very hard to read for a general public audience. And it has to be audience focused, so you have to know or at least have a slight idea of a person who you are trying to talk to in your communication. So why blogging again? Apart from all the high-level sustainability visionary goals, it is a great way for you to build your profile online, to make yourself visible, to increase downloads and readership of your research, to attract funders, and it's as Ilva also pointed out, it's a way for you to put yourself on the map. And I think that every blog has to have a KISS, which means keep it short and simple. I cannot underestimate how important that is for science communication. And then this is an outline of things that I thought that are can be then used for by you to go through when you're sitting there and you just don't know how to start, you don't know what to write, you don't know the structure. I thought that these things will help you and serve you as a guide. So again, have a clear idea of who are you talking to and why are you telling this. It is blog has to have at least, well, I'd say not more than 3, but best is to have 1 message and then dive into it from different angles to discuss pros and cons. Then a catchy title, a hookup intro, and of course the photo. We'll talk about all of these points a bit further in more detail. So also when writing a blog, it is something that took a long time for us to get through with our scientists here at SEI, because I think that it is cultivated in academic circles to be impersonal, to write in passive voice. I can't even imagine how you people can write like a page in passive voice. So I think that it is very important to not be afraid to be personal, to not be afraid to show your passion, because that's how people will get interested in what you're doing. That's how a reader of I don't know, like even policymakers, they read stuff in their free time, and if there is no personal appeal there, it is less likely that the story will stick into somebody's mind and get close to somebody's heart. And then it is okay to be opinionated. It is okay to have an opinion. You know, there is no reason to be afraid of your opinion and of expressing it online in your blogs, because if that's the way you think, there is nothing wrong or bad about it. You know, it's not wrong to think anyway. And yes, it is important at the same time to be focused when you're writing. So if you're writing about reindeer herders. Don't try to jump into something else when you are writing about it. I know, like, about try to comparing it with like another story of tiger extinction or something else. Like, it's important to be focused, to keep attention of the reader. And this is, I learned this in one of the courses that I attended. I think there is really, really sweet set of rules by the famous writer George Orwell. So never use a long word when a short word can do. I will also send this presentation to everybody. If it's possible to cut out the word, do it. So kill your favorites is one of the valuable skills of a communicator and of science writing. So when you write a text, you go through it at least 5 times, or I go at least 5 times, and then I cut, because there is a lot of things that you just don't need, or the reader doesn't need to know. What they, I would say, that was not right. I would say that the things that don't add value to your key message, that stuff you can cut. Never use a passive voice where you can use an active voice. Like, I already told about it, but it's just hard to read passive voice, especially when in a science writing it tends to go into 3-line sentence with several repetitive courses. It's just very hard to comprehend. And then I've tried to avoid cliché. I know it's very hard in science, especially when you have a very specialized terminology. But I still find there is a way to express it in a human language. It was a good example that one of our communicators gave in also one of our training. Like, for example, you have a word anthropogenic change. You can change this to human-driven change, and things like that. Just make it more simple. Think of it like you're telling a story to a person who has no idea about your research, or like you're in a bar, you see a boy or a girl you fancy, and then you start talking to them, but they get super bored if you talk about your research in the words that they cannot understand. And then it's fine to break these rules from time to time, but not too much. And then, so when you start writing, I think one of the most challenging things to put out there is the intro. The intro is your chance to hook the audience attention. If you don't hook it, get audience's attention, I'd say in 2 paragraphs, they will click to a link on this page or go to some other page. So first, second, okay, third, fourth sentence. It is the place where you introduce the problem, you explain why what you're writing about matters, why it is important, for who it is important. Also it is a place where you can say why it is so interesting. So sometimes people put in the introduction also what to expect. So, for example, you can put a really snappy questions in the beginning in the first paragraph, and then say, in this essay or in this blog, I will explain this and that and that and that, and you will find some clues to why and how you can answer those questions that you wrote in the first paragraph. And as I said, you only have so little time to get your readers interested in what you're trying to tell them about. And this is a good technique, but I I already mentioned this with an example of a person you fancy in a bar. But I think that I also get some stuck in sometimes when I'm trying to frame the story that I'm trying to tell. So I think it's a good technique to think of just telling it in a phrase like you never met this person and you are trying to explain what you do and what you're currently working on. And that can be your introduction. So that's a good training and a good technique, I think. The next point is structure. Structure is something that definitely can help you guide you in your writing, because sometimes you know the issue you're writing about, but you don't know how to express it, you don't know how to pack it. So there are sets of different structures that you can follow to pack your messages in. The two most common ones that I used in media writing is the cone and the sound clock. So the cone, you're starting from it's usually the news time format. So you start with with a small tiny event that happened, and then you knit it into a bigger picture. For example, there was an accident with a wind turbine, and then you weave it into how for instance something was done not right with the policy and several environmental conditions were not considered, and then offer change into a bigger picture based in one single event or a smaller case. And the second one is the sound clock. This is for a bit of a longer stories writing, which is called feature writing. It's where you first provide the background, then you go to your event, and then you again put the event into big picture of the background. This just gives you more space. Essentially, they are very similar, but the second one is for longer formats, so it gives you more space. It's it's basically when you have more space character, because how it works in communications world, that you will get the exact amount of characters that you can have in your piece. And these are more examples of different structures of how you can pack the message. So it's pretty self-explanatory here. So you can tell a story, telling about a sequence events, and then putting it into the bigger picture. I think that Anneli's presentation focuses a lot about that technique. Then you can evaluate pros and cons. This is similar to the IMRAT structure that is used in academic essays, but you just write it in one paragraph, each argument. Then you can do the causal structure, which explains the reasons of change, why, for example, there was an accident, and then you can look into why it happened. It works really well. This structure works very well when you're writing about the root causes of some event that has deeper grounds to address. And this is the last part of my presentation, is how to craft key messages. It's important so each key message, I would say, is when you start writing, you're thinking, what do I want to say in my blog? And you start from the key messages, I would say, and you write in 2-3 sentences what is really the matter you're trying to say. And you try to make sure that it is logical, that it has an emotional appeal to people, and that it also, in some of the key messages, has a call to action, telling people what is needed to be done to make the change. So here I also go through several types of construction of key messages. One is ill blame cause cure response, which is that you introduce the problem, then you explain the cause. Okay, we're in science, we usually don't point fingers and blaming somebody in person, but that's how it is in the it's just for the sake of structure. So you explain the cause, then you introduce the cure, how the problem can be solved, and also you can explore the side effects of the cure solution. Claim fact example. This is another type of structure where you can introduce the core volume. This is more for a more political communication type of messaging. For example, I think it can be effectively used in the land rights discourse, in the human rights discourse in general, because claim is an introduction of an idea which is value-based, which you can support by the facts, and then provide examples of different cases and summarize it. And that is an advocacy type of key messaging, which is similar to the previous one, but you always introduce a call to action in the end. And a bit about the headlines that Ilva has already went through with you. But I think it's a good points to have in mind as well. Just some techniques to have in mind when you write a headline and you want to make it fun, so you can play with words, you can ask your reader a question, you can use proverbs, like I for example wrote recently a blog about underutilized fruit species, and I called it "Forgotten Fruit Always Tastes Better," which essentially is the forbidden fruit always tastes better, but you just put a different word there. And this is a very effective headlines writing, and is used a lot in science communication because it has an emotional appeal to people and they want to click on it, they want to read it. So play on words, use keywords, or at least one keyword is a very good point to use in your writing, especially in your headlines, because that's how the search engine work. So the people who are working on the same topic as you are working, they will be looking for that keyword. So it's a really good idea to have at least one in your headline and another one in the stand first. And then this is something which is quite funny, but I also learned it from one of my mentors, is that communication is the art of seduction. You want people, especially science blogging, you want people to go actually to your research paper, download your research, and read about your profile. So yeah, it's try to make it engaging, try to make it interesting, try to make it personal. Don't try to write your science paper in your blog. The blog is a teaser to your research. It's a teaser. It's a teaser to your science, and it's also an opportunity to show your face, show a person behind that many passive voices sentences and graphs and policy advice that you wrote in your PhD thesis. So yeah, and then one really important rule, I think, in science communication and blog writing is that try to find new stuff. What is new? What is the new thing you are bringing to the table, to the discussion, to the discourse of the science that you are talking about? So tell people something that they don't yet know. For instance, in our communication, and this is something I think that scientists consider it's never enough to say, but something that is like context matters. And like I hear it for all 5 years that I have been working here, and I think that it is getting a bit overused. So for instance, in such examples, when you feel like, oh, I hear that a lot, but you can also say it in different ways. You can also provide an example of why one policy is not directly transferable to another place. So yeah, be sensitive and try to be innovative in your science communication. And thank you.
Okay, opening up for questions.
I was just thinking when you said that we can have an opinion, and it's just, yeah, I'm still a bit confused when you're like, when should you be your own person and when should you be speaking for, I don't know, speaking for REXSAC or speaking for university. So it's just, I mean, since we are all kind of working in kind of sensitive, it feels like if we should write a blog and state that, okay, I think this is wrong, wouldn't that impact our credibility as scientists that claim us to be neutral or something?
I think that it is, communication is not, even though I gave you like templates to use, writing is an art. And you always can pick the words, express things less strongly, less radically. I would also think that yes, in blogs at SEI, if we are writing about a very sensitive issue, we will try to use neutral language. But also, if you are strongly opinionated, it is fine to write "I think this." You know, you just find a linguistic way to flag that this is how I think. This doesn't mean that all people at REXSAC think this way. This is my opinion. And then it is usually clear from the way that the blog is framed that this is going to be an opinion piece, and another one will be a description story about a case of people, community living somewhere, you know. So it is always there is always a way to work this out. But I still think that it is very important not to be afraid to express your opinion. There are always going to be an editor, unless it is your personal blog. There are always going to be an editor who will advise you, like Andrea will advise you, okay, you shouldn't call them douchebags, stuff like that, you know.
You might get more readers that way, though.
Yeah. But I think that because science is considered so like because scientists are trying to be so objective and they are trying to be very neutral, it is partly the reason why people are not so interested in science and why they are not taking the messages on. So that's why I think that it's important to be personal and important to not being afraid to express your opinion. I mean, there is people there who are not experts at all, and they tell their opinion to everybody on the TV, you know? And why do you think that your opinion is worse than their opinion?
Yes?
I have two questions, and I was actually thinking about you when you said you shouldn't be pointing fingers, because what you're doing is basically looking at one specific company, for example, and seeing how much pollution they are emitting from one source. So it's kind of hard not to point fingers. So how do you point fingers in a nice way? I'm asking for the sake of Sandra. And what was my second question? Yeah, my second question is, since what we're dealing with is a lot related to mining companies, for example, which is sort of polarized debate, and the response from mining companies is always that researchers should be objective. And how do you sort of handle that? Is that a question?
That is a question. I'm kind of let Ylva, yeah, because we've had this with Rasmus here. If that's the
Yeah, there's always a challenge naming companies in the media, for example, or blaming someone. I think that the approach there is to tell what the research is showing, and that is done in a neutral way, and then after that point to a solution and towards the future. Not looking backwards too much, but putting facts on the table. This is the situation now. The decisions are going to be taken there, or whatever will happen. So point out the process, like the decision-making process, and then come with suggestions or recommendations for policy to change. So, I mean, we had a couple of these kind of things about water, like hydropower in Sweden, about reindeer herding and mining in Sweden as well. And I think that approach is quite has been successful, I would say, because then you don't. Otherwise, you come to this name and blame game, and it doesn't lead anywhere. So you have to think towards the future. What do you want to achieve in the future?
Anybody else?
This is slightly kind of different topic maybe, or I'm just wondering, I mean, many of you do this communications for your work, but I feel it's kind of tricky to, find the time. I mean, I know it's important, but I would be interested in hearing how to balance, like, to use Twitter and blog and maybe, take up interviews. And I'm kind of puzzled, like, how to do it. So that it's, I know that it's good to start before you want to have your article out there and have people read it. But it's just, I don't know, it takes a lot of time.
Well, that's why you have communications officer.
Yes, exactly. But I just have something. I mean, from a personal, this is my personal side, and I've been working with marketing within the private sector, and I had hardly ever used Twitter before I came here. And this is the main channel, social media channel for this type of communication. You just got to start. You just have to put yourself out there and even like say, okay, I'm actually going to, even if you have 0 followers, I'm going to tweet 3 times this week, and just to get practicing. I don't know if you've got some, yeah.
I totally agree with Andrea that just get starting is one big step, and keep it small and simple. Like go for 1 tweet a week or 3 tweets a week, or try and get help, co-write a blog with other researchers, or get someone to help you write the blog. And you can be the one giving opinions and quotes to the blog. That is also a good start, because there are blog sites out there, and they will help you writing the blog. So that could be one way to start. But I know it does take time, and I wish it was more. It gave you more credibility than what it does today. That you do science communication as part of your work, not on the side of the work. It should be incorporated in all activities, really, because it's so vital.
I think what I also want to say is that so maybe Rob doesn't agree with me, but I think that we are doing all this training in order to establish dialogue between people who work directly with communications and the researchers. We do not expect you to like go out there, write all press releases for all your papers, also for blogs and all the social media package. It is more that when we write a blog together, you understand what I'm going for, you understand how to structure it, so then we only need to go in, edit bits, and then it's ready. It's for establishing a dialogue between researchers and communications professionals. I would say that is the goal of it. It's not like we expect you to do all of that immediately on all your research.
And I think it also depends on what projects you're working on and what partners as well. Are you right? On the university, maybe not so much help, but within maybe REXSAC, there could be more help to be had. So I think you probably will face all different types of situations. So I think we need to move on. Yes, thank you again, Katja, and I'm going to present Anneli. She has a ending piece about storytelling.
Sorry. No, that's all right. You can go up there. Super. Thank you. Okay, cool. Hi, everyone. So my name is Anneli. and I work as a communications officer. I have here at SEI, also I work with project communications, and I have a background in environmental science and working especially on agro-environmental issues, and have a passion for that. I also have a passion for storytelling and how to use storytelling in science communication and to increase engagement with people in the science that we produce. So in my talk I will talk about what storytelling is and how it can be useful in science communication. And I'm sure there are different levels of knowledge in the group here, and maybe some of you have started exploring the use of storytelling or science communication in general. And then please do share during my talk, and you can also interrupt me if you have questions or you want something to be clarified. Much of what I'm going to say it also relates to the media training by Ylva and blogging by Katja, where you can apply story structure. And also towards the end, if there's something you found extra interesting, I can share with you papers or blogs or videos about that topic. So just come to me afterwards. And first, actually, we're gonna try and see if we can get out of the presentation and onto the internet. Because I'm gonna show you a video that maybe some of you have seen. It's silent, so let's go. It's an intro. Can you see? It's quite light. You see that it's moving, at least, kind of. There you go. Does anyone recognize this? Not really? Yeah, I know that Ylva does, probably, but not anyone else? You haven't seen it before? So what it's show... Yeah. Oh, it's starting another one. Oops. I'll go back 1 second. What it is that... There you go. It's called the climate spiral. So it's showing global average temperature increase over several decades. It was the climate spiral was developed in 2016 by this climate scientist, Ed Hawkins, in the UK somewhere. I guess he was a bit tired of producing his normal graphs and bar charts based on his science, so he tried something new. And what you saw was a GIF, and he tweeted it out in 2016, and just in 1 week, he had 65,000 retweets and a readership of around 1 million in terms of people coming into the site where he hosts this climate spiral. And it's just a spiral, but why do you guys think it became so popular? Do you have any ideas, any thoughts? Please feel free to chip in.
It's pretty simple visualization of the ideas, and very catchy at the same time.
Simple and catchy, yeah. True.
And it's moving. And
good, it's moving, yeah.
And he followed the pattern of calendar, and it's quite important for us. Like,
super.
To understand.
It's like a clock. It's very familiar. Yeah. And as you said, at the same time, it's moving, and it's something novel. And usually our brains are quite good in detecting novelty. And that's what really catch people's attention. And it also has this, which I think is a bit funny, this conceptual metaphor of something spiraling out of control, which is something you could say is happening with our global average temperatures today, right? With the moving part, it's easier for the eyes to process information when there's something moving. So it happens automatically compared to static bar charts. It's much easier to understand. And sometimes at SEI we say that data is, there are stories behind data and science, but there are stories without a soul. Sounds a bit cliche, but I think it's really true. And with this little video, I just wanted to show how if you just think a little bit extra, how you could present something different and something that is more intuitive and creates a connection to the ones who are watching it, then you have a bigger chance to get a spread of your research. And without even knowing it, this climate scientist, he created this really viral thing. He had no clue. And now today, I think there are many different types of climate spirals. He has a whole website and they're continuously developing that. So what is storytelling? Since ancient times, we've been using stories as a way to communicate. We did it long before we read or wrote. And today and before, it's an art form with the purpose to inspire and educate and communicate to people your beliefs, your cultural traditions or values, etc. And today it's is a very well-known means of communicating messages and engaging with people. And as you might know, that in the last decade or so, it's really been booming, the use of storytelling in the business and marketing sector. And also in recent years, we have seen an increase of the use in the different science fields, such as health science or science education, for example. But however, already several decades ago, there were people working on trying to understand what storytelling does to humans and why it can be so powerful. There was this American scholar that I came across named Jerome Bruner. He's not alive any longer. He criticized the Western society for putting too much effort in the logical scientific knowledge modes and approaches. So communicating science or communicating generally in a logical scientific way. And this quote, oops, what happened here? This quote, the choices we make in telling stories become so habitual that they finally become recipes for structuring experience itself, for laying down roots into memory, is from him. And he expressed that narratives is what we use to understand the world around us. And I will get back to this, the meaning behind this quote a little bit later. Bruner, he invested much of his energy to try and get narratives being used in science, in teaching, in the law sector, and in social debates. And that was already in the 80s. So now to this, hello, there we go, to this table. As I said, storytelling has been used in other fields, and here is a table that I, together with some colleagues here at SEI, put together for a recent paper. And you can see that there's different fields such as healthcare and climate change, using storytelling in various ways and for various target groups, from the general public to very specific decision maker groups in the UK. We in the paper we were particularly looking at systematic reviews in environmental management and environmental science, and we were writing about how storytelling could be used in the process of a systematic review to increase engagement of stakeholders that benefit or have a stake basically in the review. And when we looked into whether it was a common communications method in the field of environmental science, we found very few examples. So really, in some research fields, it has yet to reach its potential. So now I would like to talk a little bit about what happens when you listen to a story. Narratives are likely to bring about more engagement with an audience compared to the traditional scientific ways of communicating, because it's about this. It's about bridging between the pathos and the logos. The logos being the argument behind the logic itself, and pathos is about the inherent emotions or values of the listener. And so what narratives does is to provide benefits in the processing of information in human cognition. And brain science is today starting to tell us a lot about this, and I will give you some background. I'm not a brain scientist myself, but I'll give you some flavor, I thought, and talk about two of these benefits. One is about memory retention. So, alluding to that quote by Brunner, it's about narratives that, in fact, that is the way we store information, the way we remember things. So today, facts and data information is so accessible and ready available. So it's there is a risk that each of these pieces of information become less valuable. So what really matters is that you place your information in a context and you make a connection to the audience, so an emotional connection. And Katja has already linked to this and talked about this. So in other words, when you tell a story and you make a point in the story, you make this emotional connection. And when you have that emotional connection, then it's much more likely that the audience will remember you and your story. And there's been studies showing how narratives it makes the reader read or understand the text much faster and to memorize it better. There was a particular study, I think, that comparing expository text, i.e. logical, scientific knowledge, with narrative text. And the narrative text was read twice as fast and recalled twice as well compared to the expository text. The other part is about willingness to act. If the audience is likely to come and share the emotions of the characters in the story, it's very likely that the audience will also mimic or imitate the feelings and the values of those characters even after the story has ended. So creating that tension, and we'll get back to that later, and creating characters in the story that share those kind of deepest values of other human beings, then you're very likely to increase the willingness to respond and do something about the information that is given in the story. Yeah, so I just wanted to show you funny looking, it's a figure on the shape of stories developed by a businesswoman called Christina Botke. And for you, of course, you recognize this, but it's actually something you can apply in science communication. So usually what you have in stories is a character or several characters that has some kind of motivation to reach a goal. And there's a context, of course, a setting. and there is something happens, there is an incident that makes the character want to go on a journey, and before starting that journey, the storyteller tries to create an imbalance of what could be juxtaposed to what is, and it's by making that imbalance, the audience will want you to make sure that you create a solution for that imbalance towards the end. And then the character goes through different struggles, and a lot of, here's the middle part of the story, a lot of things happens here just to create your attention, or keep your attention throughout the story. Just think of, I don't know, Little Red Riding Hood, for example, going on the quest of finding Grandma who's been eaten by the wolf, and she encounters dangers on the way. Usually towards the top there's a climax and something happens, someone comes to rescue the character, or and the character returns home and has new insights, or is changing the behavior, the lifestyle, you know, that's the idea of the story. And there's usually, you know, in science communication, there will be a call to action here at the end. And that is one type of story structure, I should say. There are different types of systems or structures that you can use. But what I want to really make a point is that if the narratives that makes us pay attention and involves us emotionally are the stories that actually will move us to do something, to act. Just think of good documentary films. That's basically what they do to you. They make you want to do something about a problem. And with this dramatic arc towards the end or middle of the story, that is what is really required for high impact narratives. Keeping the attention with this structure is really crucial, and you do that by building that suspense, and at the same time you have provided kind of a vehicle for developing your characters along the way and creating that connection to the audience. And the climax will make sure that you're on the edge of your neural seats until it's finally resolved. And of course I could tell you more about what exactly happens there's lots of like chemical processes happening in the brain, but I can share with you some blogs about it later on. Now I wanted to, I think that's the next slide. Yeah. There's another video that I'm going to show to you by this guy called Randy Olson. He's written a book called Houston, Do You Hear Me? He's a former marine biologist, but then he turned into a documentary filmer. This is a short video about method, which is, it's kind of similar to what you've already done with Ylva, but in a very short and easy structure. It's called the ABT method, and, but, therefore. Has anyone heard of it before? No. Good. That makes it better. So I will put on the video. Unfortunately, we only have the speakers of the computer, but I hope that you can hear anyway. And then we'll do a small practical element afterwards. No.
And I backed up the server, and I reset the thrusters, and I'm thinking of recording a video, and... Houston? Houston, are you there?
Okay, you just bored someone. But it doesn't have to happen. There's this age-old thing called story. It has a structure we're programmed to understand. You may have heard this from all the recent books and people talking about the power of story, and yet you may still be wondering, how? Here's your answer. The ABT. It's the Universal Narrative Template. And, but, and therefore. It goes back to the Greeks, to Hegel the philosopher, and all the way up to the creators of South Park. Every good story fits this template. Setup, twist, punchline. That's what comics call it. Situation, conflict resolution. That's what MBAs call it. And guess who's used it? Abe Lincoln with the Gettysburg Address. And Watson and Crick when they reported the structure of DNA. Your favorite movies fall into the ABT. I could tell you the story of a little girl on a farm in Kansas and her life is boring, but then one day a tornado takes her to the land of Oz. Therefore, she must find her way home. Or a doctor could tell you your pulse is fine and your blood pressure is normal, but she can hear a wheeze in your lungs. Therefore, she's going to order some tests. You've heard of the elevator pitch, telling your whole story in a short elevator ride. The ABT is the narrative structure that guarantees what you say is both concise and compelling.
Well, I'm annoyed that guy fell asleep, and I have to call him back, but the ABT might help. Therefore, I'm gonna give it a shot.
It's the ABT, the DNA of story. You can read more about it in my new book.
There you go. So what very American, I realize that. But it's really useful, and it's something that's been used throughout many years. It's what is really important to remember with the ABT is that what you do is you draw connections between different pieces of information, and that is what is helping you build attention, and ultimately there's a solution. You know, it becomes resolved through the therefore part at the end. And it's just simply much more engaging this way rather than just listing points of data or scientific information. So this is a brilliant way, method to use not only for an elevator pitch, but also in a presentation. You could apply the method throughout a presentation, for example, or when you write a blog or other types of communication outputs when you create your key messages. And this is just one of several structures, but I thought that we were going, it's just the next slide, that we were going to try it out. So I thought I have an example written down here that I'll tell you, but then I thought, do we have time, Andrea?
It just depends on if anyone has a hard stop.
Oh shit, it's past 12.
But if you are willing to go on for maybe 10 more minutes, would that be okay? And feel free to leave if you need to. Okay.
Yeah, cool. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to think of your own, and then some volunteers to share them with us, and try to make it be about your science. So you don't just talk about what you did this morning, but actually base it on your on something that is really important in your science, a problem or a key message. So my example sounds like this. Researchers are struggling to find the time to do engagement with policy and practice, and decision makers cannot understand the researchers' language. But we need to bridge between the two if we want evidence-based change in society. Therefore, I believe applying storytelling when communicating your messages is a key to success. There you go. So I'll give you a couple of minutes and you can write it down or just think about it, and then we can share some ABTs, and then that's it.
I'm struggling a little bit with it.
Yeah, it's the context that you're providing there. So it can be it's more. Researchers are struggling to find the time to do policy engagement, and policymakers find it hard to understand the researchers' language. But yeah.
So it's like two parts.
Exactly.
Prediction
and resolution. Yeah. Exactly. Shall I take this? Getting there, I think. First time I did this one, I didn't get it. I was completely like, I don't know. I found it really hard. And then it was like, now I understand. Shall we start? Any volunteers? Perhaps in the back over there? I see that you're typing or writing still. It's okay if you're struggling, that's fine too. I'll give it another minute, I think. Kalle, you seem like an easy victim. You want to start?
Okay, I can try. Renewable energy production, mining of metals for electrical car batteries, and renewable forest material in northern Sweden is marketed as the solution for climate change, but it devastates the livelihoods for reindeer herders. Therefore, these cannot be considered as truly sustainable solutions.
Wow. Well done. Super. That was really good. Really short and succinct. Super. Good. Did you find it hard? No. It was just the and
There was
part.
the and part, so I just had to put an and.
It's basically describing the context a bit. Yeah, exactly. Two parts of it. Anyone else? I saw that you were writing as well, Andrea.
Yes, I have one.
Do you want to go?
Sure.
You need this one.
Changing to a more sustainable lifestyle is hard to achieve and even harder to communicate. But reaching people through good examples, role models, and what's the word I'm looking for? And influencers has worked with other types of marketing. Therefore, we want to try this out to communicate sustainability.
Well done. Super. And it really gets your attention. It follows such a coherent structure, so it's so easy to follow. Ylva, I see you over there. Do you have any examples? Yeah? You want to have this mic? Just a second.
I'm not sure. I tried to finish up because I was running out of time. But anyway, okay. Past ideas of profitability changed the way reindeer meat was handled, and traditional ways of meat conservation were lost. But these traditional and indigenous ways are important for indigenous self-determination. Therefore, the food industry needs to make more space for it.
Super. Getting the hang of it. Anyone else wants to share theirs? Ylva? Yeah.
On memory. It's going to be a totally different topic. I've been playing the cello for many years and I learned all the notes. And there are so many notebooks with these complicated explanations. It takes several years to learn. But when you listen to music, it should be simple. Therefore, I'm only improvising nowadays.
Interesting. Very good. Anyone else? I think we stop there, perhaps. I just wanted to show, I can just have it in the background. I had some books listed where you can read more if you're interested in the topic. But there's also articles and blogs and stuff. So you can always send me an email and I can share some stuff with you and the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So just wrapping up, thank you so much for coming. Thank you for joining online, those who made it through the couple of hours. Please reach out to me if you have any questions, if you'd like to discuss this further, if you would like to talk about a blog. If you don't want to talk about it, I will be talking to you about blogs. And just, hopefully this will start something and or continue something. And good luck to all of you. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you.